These are 5 reasons why you may not be achieving your financial goals, starting with the fact that you don't have well set goals. It sounds obvious, but if you don't have any goals, of course, you're not going to achieve them. And sometimes our financial goals are not very well set. They are not specific. They are things like I want to be a millionaire, I want to be able to retire, or I want to be able to afford housing or a car. Those are not very specific. Instead, you can use the SMART method to create very specific, very well laid out goals. This SMART method says that goals should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be achievable, they should be relevant, and they should be set in time. So, for example, by specific, we could set the goal of I want to buy a Mazda 2. That is a very specific goal, but of course by itself it is not enough. It should be measurable, and in the finance world this is very simple. We just set the amount of money that we need. So my goal would be to have $25,000 to buy a Mazda 2. It should also be achievable. So if you're currently making no money, you're in school, this is very much an unachievable goal. You should set goals, even difficult to achieve, but achievable nonetheless. If you set unachievable goals, all that's going to happen is that you're going to feel bad when you realize that you cannot achieve those goals that you set. It should also be relevant. It should be something that is actually important to you, not just goals that are being set by someone else, by society, or by keeping up with the Joneses. This should be relevant to you so that you know that you're going to be motivated when achieving them. And finally, they should be set in time, so you should set a time frame of when you want to achieve your goal. Having this SMART method means that by the end, your goal is not to be able to afford a car. Your goal is to save $25,000 to buy a Mazda 2 in 3 years. This is a very specific goal that by itself starts to lay out some of the plan that you can follow to achieve it. Because in the financial world, you can categorize your goal, whatever it was, in 3 different categories. It can be a short-term goal, something that you want to achieve in the next 12 months, in which case that if you want to save X amount of money, you simply divide that amount of money by the amount of months that you have left, and you know exactly how much money you have to save each month. It's that simple. Now, if your goal falls into the second category, which is the medium-term goal, that goal that you want to achieve in 1 to 7 years, then you have to start to consider inflation. How much more money would you have to spend in order to afford this thing in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, when inflation would have made that thing more expensive? So maybe $25,000 for Mazda 2 won't be enough in 3 years' time. Maybe you're going to need $28,000. So you would have to keep that into account. And of course, do a similar thing that you would do in the short-term goals, dividing the amount of money by the amount of time, so you know how much money you will have to save each month. And finally, if your goal is a long-term goal, a goal that you want to achieve in 7 or more years, then not only do you have to account for inflation, of course, not only do you have to account for how long do you have to save, but you can start to account for how much your money can grow when it is invested. As you can see, by setting a SMART goal, now you also have a good idea of what kind of plan, what kind of things you would need to consider to achieve that goal. Now, a second reason why you may not be achieving your goals is that your goals are misaligned with your current priorities. So we have already taken a look at this SMART way of creating a goal. And remember that good SMART goals should be relevant to you. That is great, but the thing is, more than one goal can be relevant to you and still not be aligned to your priorities. For example, I remember a few years back when 2 of my main goals were to have a car and to pursue financial freedom. Initially, they were not compatible, even though they were both relevant to me. So I had to think very carefully about what was more important to me, align my goals to my priorities. And at that point, I was only getting started in my financial journey, so I had a very small amount of money saved up. But at that time, I was also surrounded by a lot of people who already had cars. They were my classmates. I was doing my financial degree, and their parents had money. My parents didn't. So they had cars. I didn't. But I wanted to fit in. I wanted to have a car so I could move easier in a place where public transportation is horrible. So even though rationally I could think that pursuing financial freedom is more important, emotionally getting a car was more important, so I could fit in that group of people. Of course, thankfully, eventually I did get my head straight, and in my mind, it didn't make sense. It was even ridiculous to think of buying a $25,000 car when I didn't even have that amount saved up or invested towards my financial freedom. It just made no sense. It really sounded ridiculous to think about spending that much money when I didn't even have that much money saved up working for me. So I think just aligning your goals to your priorities is going to help you tremendously in the long term. Now, the third reason why you may not be achieving your goals is that you lack patience. Lacking patience causes a lot of problems because we want things for yesterday. We want the car now, today, and we want our new home tomorrow, and we want financial freedom the next year. This means that not only do you start to look for shady ways to make money quickly, which end up just making you lose a lot of money quickly, but talking about the context of achieving your goals, it means that even if you have a plan that you are very confident will allow you to achieve your goal in a certain amount of time, you're going to disregard that plan in favor of one that allows you to achieve that goal quicker, which most of the time is going to rely on financing your goal. So even if you know that saving $100 a month for a year is going to allow you to buy the new iPhone, you don't want to wait a year, you go ahead and finance the iPhone, and you end up having to pay, yes, $100 a month, but not for a year, but for 18 months or something like that. Why would you choose a plan in which you have to pay $1,800 instead of $1,200? I don't know. Well, I do know it's impatience, but makes no rational sense. So that's why I call interest simply tax on impatience. Just be patient over the long term. That will allow you to achieve your goals more easily because you're going to have more money available because you are not spending that much on paying interest to the bank. Finally, the fourth reason why you may not be achieving your goals is that you lack financial education. Now, if you lack financial education and you are young, say less than 25 years, it is not your fault. We weren't taught about financial education in school. It is still your responsibility to learn, but it's not your fault that you haven't learned so far. Now, if you're more than 25 years old, not only is it your responsibility to learn, but it is also your fault that you haven't learned yet. Because it is our responsibility to know how to use a credit card if we are asking for a credit card, for example. Or it is our responsibility to know how to save our money and make sure that it is not losing value due to inflation. If we are seeing headlines about inflation, we should be worried about looking for an account, an investment account that allows us to generate some money so that our money can keep up with inflation, or small things like that. It is our responsibility to know how a mortgage would work. How would we pay for it? How much interest would we pay if we pay a certain amount every month? What changes if we opt to pay a little bit less, a little bit more every month? What changes if we want to pay it in 5 instead of 10 years, and so on and so forth. Now, in the context of this video of achieving your goals, I want to talk about realistic expectations. Because if we start to project our money growing, if we're already investing it for a goal that we have for 20 years from now, and we use unrealistic expectations, of course, 20 years from now, because we set unrealistic expectations, we are simply going to fail on achieving our goals. Right now is a very good example. Right now, interest rates are high. In the US, we can find 4.5 interest rates. In Australia as well, 4.35 is the current interest rate from the central bank. So Even treasury bills in the US, that is the least risky investment available, we can generate a good amount of interest. But if we project our savings growing at that rate for 20 years invested in treasury bills, we are going to fail because those interest rates are not going to last for the entire 20 years. Learning, for example, that a passive investment in an index fund indexed to the S&P 500 would grow around 8%, 7% if we want to be a little bit more cautious, can help you make better projections and understand a little bit better how much you would have to save every month to actually achieve your goals in time. If you take a look at the recent performance from the S&P 500 and find that it has grown 20% in a year, and you make your projections based on a 20% growth year after year, your projections are going to fail because that is simply not going to happen throughout the next 20 years. Now, if it does happen, great, but you should not rely on that. So those are the 4 reasons why you may not be achieving your goals. And finally, by taking care of each and every one of these, you're going to end up with a good plan. Not only are you going to have created a SMART goal that is going to set out where you want to get, it will also allow you to know what steps you have to take to get there. You can start to understand how long it is going to take for you to get there. And getting a little bit of financial education, you can start to understand what kind of tools you can use to get there. So there you have it, 4 very important things that you have to keep in mind from now on when setting up your financial goals, so you can actually start achieving them and not simply having some goals floating around, very blurry, very not well set, that you're simply never going to achieve. Hopefully this video has been useful. If it was, please consider subscribing. I am going to be posting more often in this channel, so hopefully I will continue to see you around. Catch you in the next one.